This is the story of Gondor's forgotten line, the Watchers in the Shadow, the House of Húrin. The story begins long before Denethor, before Boromir, before Faramir. It begins in the year 1998 of the Third Age, with the disappearance of Gondor's last king, Arnor. He rode to challenge the Witch King of Angmar and never returned. No heir came after, no king sat the throne again, and so the line of stewards rose. The first of these was Mardil Voronwe, son of Vorondil, a man of deep loyalty who began the ruling legacy of the House of Húrin, named for Hurin of Emin, an early steward of noble Númenorian descent. They swore an oath unlike any royal line. The stewards of Gondor shall hold the rule, but not the crown. It was a sacred promise, to protect the kingdom, but never claim it. That promise would hold for over 1,000 years. The House of Húrin endured through centuries of slow erosion. No great triumphs, no grand expansion, only vigilance. The stewards faced plague and war, the kin strife, corsairs' raids, the rise of Mordor again. They ruled from the White Tower, while Gondor's borders shrank and its strength waned. The line of kings had vanished, but the line of stewards endured, generation after generation, a flame flickering against the darkness. Tolkien's world was not one of easy victories. Even before Sauron returned, the West was fading. By the time Denethor was born, Gondor had already become a relic, a nation haunted by its own past glories. Let's explore the slow, beautiful unravelling of a world already fading. Some stories start in darkness and end in dawn. But Tolkien's world, it begins in golden light and drifts slowly into twilight. Middle-earth was already dying, not with fire, but with memory. Its greatest wonders, Ents, elves, magic, were thinning long before Frodo ever left the Shire. The world was changing, and not for the better. The elves were the first to feel it, immortal, timeless, yet tired. They weren't dying, but they were fading, becoming shadows in a world no longer meant for them. Galadriel knew it. Even in victory, her land would pass. If you succeed, our power is diminished, and Lothlorien will fade. To win meant to leave. To preserve meant to say goodbye. And it wasn't just the elves. Men were fading too. Gondor, once proud, once radiant, had become a hollow echo of its past. Its kings long gone, its stewards clinging to the memory of light. Denethor broke under the weight. Aragorn rose to bear it. But even his coronation wasn't a new beginning. It was the closing of a book. Gandalf said it best: "All worthy things that are in peril, those are my care, and I shall not wholly fail. If anything can still grow fair again. Not restore, just preserve." And then there's Frodo. The ring is destroyed, Sauron is gone, but Frodo does not heal. There is no real going back. Though I may come to the Shire, it will not seem the same, for I shall not be the same. He tries to live, he tries to stay, but the wound is too deep. So he leaves, quietly, westward. It's not a reward, it's a fading. Even Sam, brave, grounded Sam, will follow him someday. Not for adventure, but for rest. The fellowship ended not in reunion, but in parting. And then comes the final echo, the scouring of the Shire. No great evil, just smoke, greed, bitterness, factories instead of fields, order without joy. Frodo says, "I tried to save the Shire, and it has been saved, but not for me." The world they fought for lives on, but the ones who saved it quietly slip away. Because Tolkien didn't write a story of eternal triumph. He wrote a story about what it means to let go. He once said, "I am a Christian, so do I not expect history to be anything but a long defeat, with glimpses of final victory?" This was his final glimpse. Magic fading, heroes passing, but seeds still being planted, and songs still being sung. Middle-earth ends, not in destruction but in dusk, and in the gentle golden light we remember that even the fading of something great can be beautiful. Denethor's father, Ecthelion II, was a respected and wise ruler. A mysterious captain named Thorongil rose to fame, fighting corsairs, winning victories, and even great acclaim. But Thorongil had a secret name, Aragorn. Denethor saw through him. He understood that this man wasn't just a talented commander, he was a rival, a king in waiting. Where his father welcomed Thorongil, Denethor grew weary, not just of the man, but of what he represented. A time when Gondor would no longer need a steward. This tension shaped Denethor's life. He was born into leadership already looking over his shoulder. He became the 26th and final ruling steward of Gondor, sharp of mind, stern in judgment, loyal to Gondor beyond question. But Denethor was not at peace. He studied lore obsessively. He peered into the Palantir, the Seeing Stone, seeking knowledge, and instead found despair. Through the stone, Sauron showed him truth, distorted just enough to twist hope into fatalism. And then his wife died. Finduilas of Dol Amroth, his beloved, passed away young. His spirit withered in the cold stone of Minas Tirith, and her death left a wound in Denethor's soul. He never recovered. Before we call him mad, we must understand the weight he bore, and what broke him long before the fire. What Tolkien wrote isn't the story of a villain. It's the quiet unraveling of a leader who saw the truth and lost his strength to bear it. This is the story of power without hope, and why sometimes the fire isn't rage, it's grief. To many readers and viewers, Denethor is a failed steward, a cruel father, a prideful man who resists change, a foil to Gandalf, and a shadow to Aragorn. But what if Denethor wasn't resisting out of arrogance? In the books, Denethor is not insane. He's brilliant, calculating, and heartbreakingly alone. He says, "The rule of Gondor is mine and no other's, unless the king should come again." But what he means is, the king will not come. Not in time, not in strength, not before the dark takes us all. Let's talk about grief. Denethor has lost Boromir, his heir, his pride, his strength, and he blames the quest, the fellowship, and above all, Gandalf. "Do I not know how you would have us live? You would have us fall down and worship a new king." His anger masks heartbreak. He sees his line ending, his city crumbling, and then Faramir rides out, not in rebellion, but in obedience. Denethor sends his last son to die. Why? Because he believes the war is already lost, and in his despair, he believes there is no mercy left in this world. There's a twist. Denethor's despair isn't delusion, it's based on real knowledge. He uses the Palantir, a seeing stone, to look across Middle-earth, but Sauron shows him what he wants him to see. Ruin, fire, defeat. Denethor sees the truth, but not all of it, and that's the heart of this tragedy. Tolkien warns us, the seeing stones show many things, and those who look in them may be deceived. Denethor isn't mad. He's overwhelmed by a world he understands too well, but no longer trusts to surprise him. Now consider Aragorn, also heir to a long line, also wearing the weight of the past. But he steps into shadow with faith. He believes in eucatastrophe, that unexpected grace might come in the end. That's what Denethor cannot see. He and Aragorn are mirrors, both noble, both proud, but only one holds on to hope. Denethor's fall is not cowardice, it's what happens when knowledge outpaces trust. Have you ever been so burdened by truth that hope felt foolish? Have you ever watched someone leave with strength, but no light? Denethor's story isn't just a warning, it's a plea. That even those who see clearly must find someone to believe with them. After Finduilas' death, Denethor poured his pride and purpose into his eldest son, Boromir. Boromir was everything Gondor admired: strong, brave, loyal, unyielding. He carried the White City's hope and Denethor's expectations on his shoulders. When the dream of Isildur's bane came, it was Boromir whom Denethor trusted to go north, not Faramir. Boromir was the heir in Denethor's heart, and his death would shatter more than just a father's pride. He was called proud, not reckless, but in the end, Boromir fell in defence of the very innocence he longed to protect. Boromir is often remembered for his failure. He tried to take the ring from Frodo. He fell to its temptation. He broke the fellowship. But that's not where his story ends, and it's not how Tolkien meant us to remember him, because Boromir's death is not just tragic, it is redemptive. It is the moment when strength becomes sacrifice, and pride becomes courage. Boromir is not a villain who failed. He is a man who fell, and then stood up again, and in that standing, he saved everything. Boromir's flaw was never malice, it was fear. He feared for Gondor, he feared for his people, he feared that no one else truly understood the weight of his city's burden. He was proud, bold, and utterly human. He told the council, "By our valour the wild folk are restrained, by the blood of our people are your lands kept safe." This is the heart of Boromir's character. He doesn't want power for himself. He wants safety for his people, and that's why the ring tempts him so effectively. Not with wealth or domination, but with protection. When he tries to take the ring from Frodo, it's not because he's evil. It's because he thinks he's the only one strong enough to bear it. A terrible mistake, but an honest one. And in Tolkien's world, that makes all the difference. Boromir's temptation is one of the most relatable in the entire story. Because who among us hasn't tried to take control, thinking we knew better? Who hasn't justified something dangerous in the name of something good? Tolkien doesn't condemn Boromir for falling. He honours him for confessing. "I tried to take the ring from Frodo. I am sorry, I've paid." This line, spoken with his final breath, is not an excuse. It is a recognition of truth. It is repentance, and that's the turning point. When the orcs attack, Boromir doesn't flee, he stands. Not for honour, not for glory, but for Merry and Pippin, two hobbits he once thought weak. He dies protecting them. Boromir had slain many. His shield was cloven in two. His sword was broken, but still he fought on. This is what makes Boromir noble. Not a throne, not a title, but a moment of unrelenting courage. He fights with nothing left, not even hope, just love. And when Aragorn finds him, Boromir doesn't plead. He doesn't demand recognition. He simply admits the truth, and then he offers his loyalty. "I would have followed you, my brother, my captain, my king." This moment was a quiet redemption Tolkien was so masterful at writing, because in death, Boromir becomes what he always was meant to be: a protector, a brother, a humble man. We often look at the story of the Fellowship as Frodo's burden, Aragorn's rise, Sam's loyalty, but Boromir reminds us of something just as important. That heroism isn't about being flawless. It's about getting back up after you fall, and more importantly, what you choose to do with the time you have left. Boromir doesn't die to save the world. He dies to save his friends, and in doing so, he saves the heart of the Fellowship. Because it's Boromir's sacrifice that propels Aragorn into leadership. It's his death that forces Aragorn to take up the mantle of king. Without Boromir's fall and his redemption, there is no Return of the King. Tolkien, a veteran of the First World War, understood what it meant to lose comrades. To see noble men broken, not by cowardice, but by the overwhelming burden of duty. Boromir embodies that truth. He is not an ideal, he is not untouchable, he is us, and that is why his story matters. Because most of us are not Frodo, we are not Aragorn, we don't carry legendary swords or elven light. We carry fear, pride, guilt, hope. We fall. And like Boromir, we can rise. We can fight for those we once overlooked. We can admit when we've failed. We can stand in the face of darkness, knowing it may cost us everything, and still say, I would have followed you, my captain, my king. Boromir's sacrifice does not erase his mistake, it redeems it, because Tolkien believed that even in the darkest fall, there is always a path back to the light, and it is never too late to choose courage in the end. Faramir was never what Denethor wanted. He was thoughtful, gentle, and yet he was wise and strong in a deeper way. He resisted the ring, something Boromir could not, but Denethor could not see it. He saw in Faramir not strength but failure, not devotion but defiance, and when Boromir died, he could not help but blame the one who lived. Faramir never needed glory. What he gave Gondor was far more enduring, the kind of strength that kneels and listens and waits. In a world full of crowns, swords and rings, Faramir chose restraint, wisdom and mercy. Let's discover why that makes him one of Tolkien's greatest heroes. Faramir is one of the most overlooked heroes in Middle-earth. Not because he lacked courage, not because he didn't face temptation, but because his strength was quiet, measured. And in a world filled with crowns and wars and rings of power, he chose something better. He chose wisdom and mercy, and that, Tolkien tells us, is what makes him truly noble. We meet Faramir in the Two Towers, and at first we brace ourselves. He is Boromir's brother, he is the captain of Gondor, and Frodo carries the One Ring. We know what happens when good men try to bear that burden. We expect him to fail, but he doesn't. Faramir looks at Frodo, at the weapon that could save his city, and says, I would not take this ring if it lay by the highway, not to a Minas Tirith falling in ruin, and I alone could save her. In that moment, he becomes something rare in Tolkien's world, a man of power who refuses it. Faramir is not blind to Gondor's peril. He knows his people are struggling. He feels the same fear Boromir did. But where Boromir turns to force, Faramir turns to trust. Where Boromir reaches out, Faramir lets go. This isn't weakness, it's self-mastery, and it is hard won. Faramir had grown up in the shadows of two things, a broken city and a father who cannot love him. Denethor calls him weak, favours Boromir, mocks his gentleness. You are always soft, always you pity. And yet Faramir pities anyway, because he knows something his father doesn't, that gentleness is not the absence of strength, it is the control of it. Tolkien created Faramir, in part, as an echo of himself. In his letters he writes, as far as any character is like me, it is Faramir. He is a lover of law, a quiet man in loud times. He is not made for war, but he endures it. And he does so without losing his heart. Faramir is not just a warrior, he is a steward. And in Tolkien's world, that title means something sacred. To protect what is not yours, to tend to something beautiful that may not survive. This is what Faramir does. With Gondor, with Frodo, with Middle-earth. Even Aragorn never touches it. Gandalf won't go near it, Boromir tried to take it, but Faramir is offered the ring and refuses it freely. His greatest moment isn't on the battlefield. It's in letting Frodo go. It's in resisting the ring when no one else could. I do not love the sword for its sharpness, nor the arrow for its swiftness, nor the warrior for his glory. I love only that which they defend. This is the heart of Faramir. Not to dominate, but to defend. Not to rule, but to serve. And that is what makes him heroic. And yet, Faramir suffers. When he returns to his father after letting Frodo go, Denethor nearly disowns him, and still Faramir obeys. He rides to war, not to win glory, but because it is his duty. I do not hope to see my father again, but he has commanded me. He goes to Osgiliath, he nearly dies, and Denethor, in madness, prepares to burn him alive. Even unconscious, Faramir is the image of quiet endurance. It is only through Pippin and Gandalf that he is saved. And when he wakes, he does not seek vengeance. He leads, he heals, he begins again. In The Return of the King, Faramir meets Éowyn. She is broken, grieving, full of fire and sorrow. And he does not try and fix her, he simply sees her, he listens, he waits, and he says, "Do not scorn pity. That is the gift of a gentle heart." Faramir becomes the steward not only of a city, but of a soul, and in doing so he is healed too. They rise together, not in triumph, but in tenderness. Tolkien once wrote, "The most heroic characters are often the most quietly humble." Faramir doesn't slay dragons. He doesn't wear a crown, but he turns away from power, he resists despair, and he loves when it would be easier to close his heart. Faramir reminds us that not all heroes ride at the front of a charge. Some sit in silence, make hard choices, and endure. He is the brother who learned, the son who remained kind, the soldier who laid down his sword. Faramir's strength is not in his arm, but in his will. And in the world Tolkien gives us, he is the strength that endures. In the final days of the War of the Ring, Gondor burned. Denethor, broken by Boromir's death, and driven mad by the visions of the Palantir, ordered a funeral pyre for his still living son. He no longer saw any difference between Gondor's fall and his own. It was not evil that consumed Denethor, it was love, twisted by despair. Faramir was saved by Gandalf, but Denethor chose fire. He died not as a villain, but as a warning of what happens when power is carried without hope. With Denethor's death, the House of Húrin came to its end. Faramir survived, but he could not become the next steward in the same way. When Aragorn reclaimed the throne, Faramir laid down the rod of stewardship and was given a new one. He became Prince of Ithilien, a title of peace, not burden. The long line had ended, not in triumph, not in shame, but with release. The stewards held the line, not to win, but to endure. And in Tolkien's world, that endurance is the very soul of heroism. Victory in Tolkien's world is never the end. It's never clean, and it's never final. Yes, Sauron falls, the ring is destroyed, the king returns. But something else happens too. The elves leave, the magic fades. And the greatest heroes, Frodo among them, do not stay to enjoy the peace they fought for. Tolkien called this the long defeat. I am a Christian, and indeed a Roman Catholic, so that I do not expect history to be anything but a long defeat, though it contains some glimpses of final victory. This isn't cynicism, it's something deeper, a kind of hope that exists within grief. Not the triumph of strength, but the endurance of spirit. The idea isn't limited to the end of The Lord of the Rings. It's stretched far back, into the oldest parts of Tolkien's Legendarium. In the first age, the elves fight Morgoth, the first Dark Lord. They have power, light, immortal lives, and still they lose, time after time. All the victories of the Eldar turn to ashes. Their kingdoms fall, their greatest warriors perish, their most beautiful creations, like the Silmarils, are tainted by greed and grief. This wasn't just a plot. Tolkien was showing us something, that no matter how noble, no matter how strong, good things in Middle-earth are always at risk, because nothing perfect stays. When Sauron is defeated, the elves end, right? Well, not exactly. Because Tolkien knew something about the world, and about people. Evil doesn't vanish, it shifts, it changes form. Tolkien's world doesn't believe in final triumph, only the necessity of resistance. Sauron is gone, but Frodo is wounded. The Shire is scarred, the elves fade, and something bright is forever lost. Even in victory, there is exile. Perhaps the most haunting symbol of the long defeat is the elves themselves. They do not die, they do not age, but they fade, slowly, quietly, painfully. They watch the world change, their beauty becomes alien. Their presence becomes unnatural, and so they leave. The elves have their own labours and sorrows, and they pass into the west. This is not a punishment, but a relinquishing. Tolkien's elves are not meant to rule forever. They are a memory of a more beautiful time, slowly disappearing so that the world can move on. The long defeat is not just about battles, it's about letting go. So why keep fighting? If defeat is inevitable, why struggle? Because to Tolkien, courage in the face of decline is not futility, it is virtue. Not in triumph, but in persistence. Not in reclaiming the past, but in protecting the good that remains. Sam keeps planting, Faramir rebuilds. Aragorn rules wisely, knowing even his kingdom will fade in time. They all know what Frodo knew. There was no real going back, but still they go forward. Perhaps no character lives the long defeat more fully than Frodo. He saves the world, but he cannot save himself. I have been too deeply hurt. I tried to save the Shire, and it has been saved, but not for me. This is the cost. This is sacrifice. Frodo's plan doesn't cancel the victory, it defines it. It reminds us that some battles leave marks that even magic can't erase, and that healing is not the same as forgetting. Tolkien wasn't writing escapism, he was writing meaning. The long defeat is an answer to a world at war, loss, and fading cultures. It's what he saw in the trenches, what he grieved after the death of his friends, what he feared as modernity replaced myth. And yet, he didn't write despair. He wrote hobbits, he wrote lembas bread. He wrote hobbits, he wrote lembas bread, he wrote a ring thrown into fire. Not out of hatred, but out of mercy. Because while the world declines, there is still good worth preserving. Tolkien never promised us triumph. He promised us something quieter, a hope that endures even as beauty fades. The long defeat is not a failure, it's a frame, a way of seeking our own world with humility and heart. So let the elves fade, let the white tree shed its leaves, but hold your ground like a hobbit in a garden, and keep the fire lit, not because it will burn forever, but because it still burns now. The House of Húrin never ruled as kings. They never sat upon the throne, but they preserved Gondor through plague, war, and fading light. They were caretakers of a broken world, burdened with memory, guided by duty. And though Denethor fell, and though Boromir died, and though Faramir was almost lost, they held on. The hands of the kings are the hands of a healer, Aragorn says. But the hands of a steward are the hands that carried the wound until the healer arrived. The House of Húrin was never meant to last forever. But without it, Gondor would not have lasted at all. And sometimes, the greatest legacy is not in claiming the crown, it's in keeping it safe for someone else.